Thank you, Jose. Yeah, I love getting to hear all the different perspectives, and I think that's something that we really need in our community, and we need when thinking about how do we expand. And to that end, I want to start by really hitting home on expanding the industrial ecosystem. So originally I had on this slide expanding the ecosystem, but I changed it because what I want to hone in on letting us grow the industrial use of Haskell, and I think that we're okay on the non-industrial side of things. Expanding the Haskell ecosystem in academia and the hobbyist areas, and really anywhere outside of industry use is valuable, but maybe places that we're stronger than we are in industry. So, and this is one of the core missions on the Haskell Foundation. If you go to the Haskell Foundation website, I think it's the third bullet point on the site. It's right up there. And it's only in our best interest to expand and get more ideas and more perspectives and more money so that we can be employed writing Haskell. So if we're going to talk about expanding, then let's start with who. Who are we talking about expanding, and where are our possible biggest gains? And really start to look at the various developer groups. I'm going to split them into 4, and they're going to cover a big range, and we'll see how that really starts to play out. So the first in my little categorization here are people that are knowledgeable and or passionate about Haskell, and maybe slightly beyond that about functional programming and know OCaml or anything related. So this group of people know Haskell, they use it professionally, they use it in academia, but they know what's going on. Who is that? That's you. And sorry to say, you are not the target for expanding Haskell because you are the Haskell today. So we're not going to focus so much when thinking about expansion, this set of people. So next, we have people that are curious. This might be people that will go to the Haskell discourse or Reddit. They might see a blog post about something exciting and try it out, but they don't have a whole lot of academic or industrial experience with Haskell. This group is sometimes very easy to disappoint because they might come to Haskell from something like Elm. And Elm is very gentle for people. And then when they hit something in GHC, they might find, oh, this is not Elm. And yes, Haskell isn't Elm. And that can be very disappointing for this group of people, but this group of people also can very quickly turn into the passionate. So again, starting with how can we expand, this isn't really the group of people that I want to focus on because we've already started to draw them in some way. So the next group that I want to talk about are people that might already be using Haskell and you don't even know. And that's people that are unengaged. So we have companies that are using Haskell that lurk. They don't contribute to the ecosystem, at least directly. They're absolutely not represented here. These companies are not tech companies. They're not Meta. They're companies that are in any given industry and someone, somewhere, decided that they wanted to use Haskell at one of these companies, and people are using it. But it's just a job for them. They're not passionate about type theory. They're not going to ever participate on discourse, Reddit, GHC proposals. They might not even know that Zerahack exists, but they're professional Haskell engineers. And this group is a group that I think is actually really important, because if you look at the average developer in a widely successful language, Python, Java, JavaScript, Go, that's this group. That is the average developer in your big, successful industrial languages. They're people that they do their job and go home, or go out of their office if they're if they're working remote. So we need this group, and we need to be able to hire into this group. So I said there were 4. So, and I've mentioned there are companies that are using Haskell. Well, some of those people are not friendly. They might not want to be using Haskell at all. And they might have been moved to a Haskell project when they were hired to do Java. I've experienced this. I've worked with people that are like this. They work at a big company and, oh yes, I've been doing Java for 20 years and just signed on at this company, and 6 months later, now I'm being told I have to do Haskell. And they're not happy about that at all. So when this happens, and to this group of people, we have to, even if we've gone through the work of getting Haskell as an approved corporate language, you have to defend that choice again individually to this set of people. And things that come up for them can be very different than things that come up for any of the prior group of people. Whenever there's friction with tooling, people that are unfriendly about Haskell and are generally grumpy that they're doing it are going to be very loud, very quickly, saying things, why do I have to upgrade my linter because of a compiler upgrade? Why are these things tied together? Why do I have to do a Big Bang upgrade? Why any friction at all? Why is there not documentation on this? Or why does the documentation link to an academic paper in the first sentence? They will find any reason that they can to be grumpy and continue to say that we should move away from Haskell and to Java or Python or whatever their pet language is. So one of the things that we need for them is analogs. So when someone comes in and says, I do security checks in Java, what do you do in Haskell? Well, great, now we have the security response team. So we're bridging some of those gaps, but we have to keep that user base kind of in mind and know that not only are they not going to show up here or show up on issue trackers, they're just not going to participate at all, but they're important. Because the more unhappiness that they sow about Haskell, the less that we'll get to use it in industrial projects. They'll drag people down with them. So really, I want to focus on those two groups, right? The people that are unengaged and the people that are unfriendly. And I'm going to take a little bit of a turn now and look at an example tool to highlight some of our issues. And we'll start by taking a detour to give some context. So this tool that I'm about to show is one of Andrew's least favorite things. It is a GHC plugin. But I want to start and give some of the context, because it didn't start life as a GHC plugin. At no point did we, in developing this, say that, oh, we want a GHC plugin. That wasn't the idea at all. So how did this tool start? It started around late 2019, and it was being worked on for one very specific project at a big enterprise client. And there was a desire for a lot of control during refactoring. So Haskell has fearless refactoring, but this we really wanted to and needed to have 2 streams of implementation for a short period of time. And we wanted to make sure that you couldn't import the old code into the new code, so that we didn't end up with any dependencies on it in any way, shape, or form, and everything was going to get excised as quickly as possible, but it was going to take a while because it was a big code base. We're talking about thousands, it's maybe tens of thousands. It was 2019, it was a while ago. So the very first implementation of this was a shell script that generated HLint configuration. And that worked reasonably well, given that I was allowed a week. The team that I was on, they had this concept of a break week, which was kind of like a 20% time thing, but it was once a quarter. So once a quarter, the team would be given to do something for learning or project improvement. And I wrote this shell script that generated HLint configuration. It was bad. The configuration was not human readable, and it resulted in really slow execution time. In something that was thousands or tens of thousands of modules, we had a little less than 1 million lines of YAML configuration that would get generated by this shell script. It was awful. And no one wanted to maintain that shell script. So that was not fun. But it did serve a purpose. It let us state some additional invariants about the code base. So someone else at Flipstone said that was a neat idea, and they wanted it to not be a shell script that resulted in HLint taking 5 minutes to run, which is completely reasonable. It was about 6 months later that they started this, and they wanted it in that very reusable way. But they picked Haskell source extents to write this. And for those that don't know, that library is on maintenance mode, I think at best. And it's not very well maintained, and I ended up with the project that I was working on at that point. We were trying to still use this tool for again stating a bunch of extra project organization kind of invariants. And it started breaking because we were using a language extension that was too new. So we spent a bunch of time trying to figure out how are we going to rewrite this using the GHC API. And we had an additional feature that we really wanted, and this is probably my favorite feature for, at least for library authors now, which is that it offers a coverage check for haddock. So we use this now to be able to say, oh, we have to have at least haddocks for our libraries. And that can be pretty helpful. I was really surprised when looking around that there wasn't something that was already doing this. And that desire plus the desire to use things that would break with Haskell source extents led us down the GHC API path, and we started with, well, we're going to keep it as a standalone executable. And we quickly ran into, this is a nightmare to get the haddock information in the standalone executable, and said, cool, well, I guess we have to be a plugin now. And that was, again, not something that we really set out to do or wanted to do. Yes?
Doesn't haddock produce the output showing the coverage already when we run haddock?
So the question is, doesn't haddock produce the coverage in its output? And the answer is yes, it does, but there's no way to assert on it. So we wanted to be able to say, oh, there is exactly this amount of coverage today, and it's not going to get any worse as we continue to work on the library and eventually get it to 100% haddock coverage. And there was no way to do that, which again was surprising because I expected that, but it wasn't there. So we built it into our already existing tool. But that's a great question. So very quickly, what does this thing do today? It has a few features. It allows you to lock down a module tree. So this lets us say things like, this tree and everything underneath it, you have to go through this re-export module. And now you're free to refactor and move things around in there and not worry about breaking code breaking something from an import moving. That's pretty useful. We do things. This was a requested feature that got added from a Flipstone client where they wanted to ensure that the aliases that they used were always unique inside of their modules. So not across the entire project, but in a given module, not have two things imported qualified as T. They said if we import text and time, one of them can be T, but the other one has to be different so that we can understand where things are coming from. Some consistent import styles, again on a per module basis, so that we can enforce the use of the qualified post, but maybe not everywhere. Again, because projects become big and people don't want to do things in certain ways. It was a requested feature. And then that thing I mentioned at the very beginning, this kind of logical dependency between different parts of a large code base, even if they're not. So we say that they're dependents, so you're not allowed to create a virtual cycle of imports, even if it's not the literal cycle. And I already mentioned haddock coverage. Okay, so that's a very quick overview on some of the things that we can do today. Let's talk about some of the things that have been hard. Go ahead.
Just use the usage question. How does that information get made to the user? The plugin works it out and then terminal, or how is that?
So the question is, how does the information get presented to the user? So the way that this works is there's a configuration with TOML. So the user specifies the rules for their project, and then they are presented with GHC errors. Right.
So, yeah, I was wondering, does it show up in HLS? And the answer is yeah.
Yes. And that was a great advantage to the plugin, was that now it shows up in HLS or GHCID or GHCI, wherever no special support was needed for those things. But now it's a plugin, and we we don't have a good way to ship it as an executable. So we're kind of forced into that one pattern. And there are downsides, as Andrew mentioned, to plugins. And that is exactly my next point here, is support for multiple GHC versions has been difficult. Today, it supports everything from 9.4 through 9.12, and that was controversial at one of our clients who are still using 9.0. And we had to say, well, you can pay us to continue to try to support it, or we're going to take the shortcut. And we took the shortcut. It's been difficult, but I will say this, adding support for 9.12 was the easiest one yet. So that was a really nice, kind of positive thing to have happen. But the documentation in the GHC API doesn't really give you a whole lot of help for trying to understand when you should take one path or another. So when building this as a plugin, it wasn't clear, should it be a parser plugin? Should it be a type checker plugin? We wanted all of these things that didn't really fit necessarily in one bucket or the other. And now, why do I have not full screen? This is why I have not full screen. Because this page in the user's manual doesn't really give any guidance as to which one should I pick. There's stuff about using plugins, and then we'll see there's stuff about writing plugins, but all of this assumes that you know the path that you want to take. And we didn't know the path that we wanted to take. And it's still not clear if the path that we took is the right path long term or not. No idea.
Did you read the paper about plugins?
Yes.
So that's like a jokey question, but also like a sincere question. Like, is a paper good documentation or not?
A paper is great documentation for why there are plugins, but it doesn't help for this case when I'm trying to understand when to pick which kind of plugin to be.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. In the documentation there's not any information that is in the paper because put in there.
Right.
But yeah, these are very
But
useful observations. Carry on.
thank you. So some other things here include haddocks, right? So I didn't save the user's guide page for every single thing, or the GHC API docs, but they're available at type checking time, not parsing time. Why? I have no idea, but that influences the kind of plugin that we end up having to be, because certain information just isn't available in other times. And it's, again, never explained if there's a technical reason for that, which maybe there is, or if it's arbitrary or any kind of guidance on that thing. So then that really leads to how do you get information out of GHC? And you have to have prior knowledge of how GHC works, or you have to spend a lot of time with trial and error. Because even when there are papers, a lot of times the actual implementation has diverged since the paper. So now things are different and you still don't know. I have notes. Here's a concrete example of a feature that was requested, and that was a rule to require a for all in type signatures that have type variables. so that the for all is just always there and always required. And I thought about that and started looking at the GHC API and went, I don't know how to determine that information for all type signatures. I might be able to find it for one particular type signature, but how do I traverse everything? It's not trivial without a whole lot of extra knowledge. And then combine that with the GHC API also uses a lot of short names that maybe people that aren't familiar with these things don't know what the shortening is or what the acronym might be. You combine those things and, well, now our limiters or our contributors are limited even inside of Flipstone. We don't have everyone being able to contribute to this kind of tooling. And that really kind of goes back to this whole split between the different kinds of people that are using Haskell. People that are passionate will be able to figure it out. People that are unengaged and just using Haskell as their day job, they're not going to want to spend the time to figure out these kinds of things, which means they're not going to be writing tools, which means we have less tools, which means we have less money because there's less people writing tools, making the ecosystem better. Okay, go ahead.
No. Do we think that people who are currently unengaged or uninterested, I mean, they might write tools for themselves if they really need them, but they probably also aren't that excited about the concept of open sourcing them or like contributing to the ecosystem. So do we think that this would actually benefit us as an ecosystem? Like these people don't sound like the sort of people who are necessarily going to become great open source contributors, even if it was easy.
So the question is, do we think that people who are unengaged will be excited enough to release things as open source? And I think that the answer is that they will either be excited enough to release something as open source and maybe then never maintain it, but we'll still have at least an example of it somewhere, or they'll be able to become excited enough to and kind of move up that user class. And I think that we can see that from other ecosystems that do make it very easy to write tools. Ecosystems like Python and Ruby make it really easy for anybody to write tools or anybody to contribute to tools. So I think that's the other part of this, is that we're limited to contributors inside of Flipstone. I have colleagues at Flipstone that maybe I'm not going to give work on this plugin to. And if that was easier, even if they're unengaged, well, now they're being paid to do it. If it's just a little bit easier. Go ahead.
Aren't you asking rather a lot? I mean, isn't this something that's fundamentally rather advanced? And are you really expecting unengaged? I mean, I've been writing Haskell for a quarter of a century, and I've never written a GHC plugin.
So
I've written GHC code, I've contributed to GHC, and I've never written a GHC plugin. Isn't this something that's like fundamentally niche?
So the question is, and if I shorten it incorrectly, please tell me. The question is, aren't we asking a lot here for people that are unengaged because writing a plugin is niche? And I think that in some ways, writing a plugin is potentially niche, but writing tools in general isn't. And again, I think about what do other communities that I want to steal from do? And there's just ungodly numbers of Python tools.
But isn't that the engaged users writing tools for the unengaged users?
Well, but not necessarily, right? Because again, if you're employed to write it, then you're employed to write it. But we have to be able to make it easy enough for the unengaged to be even employed to do it. Does that make sense? Go ahead.
So, yeah, what's sort of the indication to you that we're not mixing up cause and effect here. Because sort of one thing that I mentioned to a lot of students, etc., who want to get into language programming is I tell them that one of the dirty secrets is that these things cost money. And so, like, is the reason that Python has a lot of tooling because it has, like, you seem to be suggesting that people who are unengaged need something to be easy so that then they write tooling and then Python becomes wealthy. When I would argue that maybe it's just because Python has a lot of money and then unengaged people get told, hey, here's $35,000 a year, write the darn tooling, that's your job, right?
So,
and I'm not saying that it's certainly that way, right?
well, I think that it's, I think it's probably, I think you're probably right, but I think that it's also a feedback cycle where if we make it a little bit easier, right, then we make it a little bit more engaged. We can move somebody from being unengaged to being more engaged, and if we can get incrementally more of those people, then we can make the ecosystem wealthier, and now those things feed back off of each other. That's really what I'm trying to drive at, is that if we make things just incrementally better in making it easy to write and maintain tools, then my idea and my hope is that we can have a virtuous cycle that feeds back on itself. Go ahead.
Can I also just add that it's not just about turning unengaged people into zealots, but also preventing them from becoming angry.
Yes.
You know, like the fewer angry people you have in the room discussing whether or not to continue in our current technology choice, you know, better off to be. And yeah, I mean, I'll just stop there. I could.
Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I think like GHG development, I think what we're seeing now is kind of like the second wave of plugin development almost. The first wave is GHG developers enable people to write plugins.
Yes.
The GHG developers are not average users of
Right.
Copilot. And then the second wave comes along, and that second wave can provide a more convenient API or extensible solution for the third wave to contribute to the second wave, and so on.
Yes.
So that's like kind of like a constructive way to think about this.
Yes. No, I agree completely.
So you have written GC plugin.
Yes.
So now you have experience in it, right? Can you, by any chance, document somewhere your experience so other people can learn from it?
This talk,
Well,
but
more technical that people can use, for example, to learn how to write GC plugins.
Make a the user guide.
I have things that are internal in our internal wiki, but I can look at seeing what I can redact to make publicly available.
It seems like this would be going toward the direction of you asking if you
Right.
follow your bill.
The best time to write documentation is just after you figured something out.
Yes.
So I've tried and failed to write a GHG application. So like in many ways, there's a sort of survivorship bias of being able to write that documentation because I don't know the right way to do it because I can't survive the process.
Right.
So there's at least something to that I'm still trying to figure out myself.
Okay.
You want to cut off the talks?
No, I can.
Question?
We can keep going.
No, okay. I mean, just something that is sort of explained already by the next browser tab. I mean, so the tool you're talking about is open source, right?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I had a link to it in the slides, and it is open source. I can. I put it there because if there were questions, I could show it. So maybe towards the end, if there are still questions, I can show in detail more information, or find me after. Okay, so and this was all just about. So coming back for a second, this was. I was talking about struggle to build features, but we also have a struggle because this is a configurable tool, and we we need to think about our users and what it's like to consume that configuration. So we have this very strong desire around smooth transitions and realizing that when you have default behavior and it changes, that can be very disruptive. And it feels like we often talk about GHC and the breaking changes from GHC, but I feel like there's a subset of industrial users, particularly ones that are in that unengaged to unfriendly kind of section, that as soon as they hit that pain point, it just slides them further and further into being unhappy. And GHC isn't the only tool here, right? So when we have changing behavior by default in things like HLS or HLent or any of the other tools, these things can have a real impact to users. So one of the things, again, that we've tried really hard to think about here is how to not do that and how we can then try to promote that kind of smooth transition in configuration and defaults across the community, because it's not always easy. Very specifically, one of the configuration things that we had originally was using DAL as the configuration, and we moved that to TOML because it was so painful for people. And it was really unfortunate for several of us because DAL was really nice in a lot of ways, but that average user who didn't want to be using Haskell or didn't care if they were using Haskell or Python, they didn't want to learn DAL. And people were grumpy about having to learn another language for a tool like this. So we've had to really, really think about our users in every step of the process. Okay, so I've been negative, but I want to talk about bright spots, because we have a lot of bright spots in Haskell tools that can really help grow our ecosystem. And the first one that every time I've ended up showing this particular tool to people that come from other languages for years, they're blown away by it. And that's Hoogle. Hoogle just if take a Python developer for 10 years or more and show them Hoogle, they're just flabbergasted and gobsmacked by it. The only thing that I hear feedback from our industrial clients about Hoogle is that they want it to be easier to set up locally. But other than that, they love it. And another one, this has really surprised me, but I've done digging at Flipstone clients and found that dead code detection from other language ecosystems, they don't do it. They just leave dead code in their Java code bases for decades. And it might not ever be called, it might not have ever been called, and they just don't know. But they pay the price of building it on every build. And part of the point here is that we're often very negative about our tooling ecosystem in Haskell. And we have tools that are great. And if we can keep working on that and making it easier and easier to build and then also maintain these tools, then we have a chance, I think, of adding another superpower to the Haskell ecosystem so that fearless refactoring and amazing tools. And I think we're actually very close to having that. And so things that are getting even better, well, documentation work. There's been a lot of work that has gone on in the user's guide, in GHC wiki documentation. A bunch of stuff like that has been going on. I've been talking to various people about doing some work around HIE files and making those more stable. That will be fantastic. Oh, and we have another talk coming up in just a few minutes about template Haskell and libraries and making that more stable. We're on our way to being much better. And I really, really want us to be able to come away from this to understand that there are users that we don't see ever. And if we continue to think about them, then we have the makings and moving in the direction of a really, really strong tooling story for the Haskell ecosystem. And so the last couple of things here is just remember again that the pain threshold for a lot of these users is really low. So as soon as there's a bad error message or they have a hard time because the tool doesn't work across GHC versions, people get grumpy quick. And spread the tooling. And I think I'm out of time. So.
Okay, let's thank Trevis.
Yeah.
So before we take a few questions, I just want to say one thing, because I think Trevis was being humble here. This isn't, online we have this tendency to make up a guy to be mad at, this isn't hypothetical, right? Trevis is talking about people that Flipstone works with that use Haskell earnestly, but don't really care about Haskell beyond it lets them do the job they're trying to do, right? So this is not a hypothetical thing. This is very much a real thing that's being experienced. Okay, with that kind of disclaimer out of the way, questions I'll let you choose.
I can't disclose our clients.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Don't ask who, okay?
Yeah, so you mentioned how people such as your clients are kind of invisible to a lot of core Haskell developers. So I'm wondering what your sense of making contact with them is. If my default mode is to not think in the way that this kind of unengaged person would, what would you suggest to me to do to learn about their preferences and things like that?
It's a great, sorry, repeating the questions. So the question is, how do we try to proactively reach out to people that are unengaged and aren't going to be participating in the ecosystem? And it's a great question, and it's a really, really hard one, because even when they are proactively, I've opened a GHC proposal, and I've gone to how many were there? 3 dozen developers individually and said, please go read this, and I don't care if you disagree with me, just leave feedback on it. And I think I got 2 people to leave a thumbs up emoji. and that was it. And so it's very hard. I think that one of the easiest things to do is try to find somebody who can think that way or works with them and try to reach out to them. But even identifying those people can be hard, because I'm here saying it, but I know that there are other people that will be in a similar situation that aren't going to be kind of proactively saying, yeah, there are invisible users and I work with them. So I wish I had a better answer. Sorry. Trying to answer them in the...
say, these people you're looking for might not be Haskellers and they might not ever be Haskellers. I work with front-end people who are like, Haskell, LOL, good luck, And after what Simon was talking about also, I feel like if the company isn't a Haskell company, Haskell is on shaky ground. So okay, maybe I should be talking to these front-end developers and explaining to them so it's not such a black box to them. They'll never be interested, but at least it won't be a black box. They'll have a little bit about it.
And to be very clear, I think that at least some of the companies that I'm trying to describe, Haskell's not on shaky ground, but they're not a Haskell company. They are primarily a Java or Python company, and in one particular example, there was a bunch of, I've talked about this at Haskell Exchange when that used to exist, replacing COBOL with Haskell, and guess what? That stuff is Haskell now, and it was COBOL before. So is it going to go away? Probably not for a long time. Go ahead.
So I think I'm maybe more me, but I feel that I can get lost in like the Haskell bubble where things work a certain way, and we have certain tooling. Maybe some things don't work as good, but it would be interesting to see like maybe like a study done on popular programming languages and what tooling they have, and the comparison with Haskell, like something more like data driven, so that we can start implementing the low hanging fruits, so that we can systematically improve the whole ecosystem.
Yes, oh, sorry. Not really a question, but for the recording, the comment is, can we do something to be more data-driven about finding our gaps? And I think that's great, and I think that the last time that I tried to do something that was a survey was at going to a client and trying to find what tools the other teams were using, and the biggest gap was the security response team. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, sorry, yeah. So there was this question earlier about how do you engage with people who are, unengaged or even hostile. So maybe, I mean, and you said that obviously you can't talk about who the clients are, but maybe like a small step into improving the situation would be to, somehow incentivize them or try to, convince them, the companies, to somehow, assume, the fact that they are using Haskell internally, right?
Right.
And I might start a conversation, right, with the Haskell Foundation, with other developers, and then be more sort of public about that.
Right.
I mean, I don't know how you would incentivize them.
Yeah. So the again kind of comment is maybe if we could incentivize people to be more forthcoming about their use of Haskell, then we could better understand these sets of currently invisible users. I think that's true, and I don't have a good idea on how to do the incentivization. There was, yes?
Yeah, so talking about engaging people and understanding their motivations, it seems like this is also sort of a work allocation problem, where it's like maybe the best developers for a Haskell plugin aren't this disengagement. And maybe the Haskell application that is delivering value to customers, and that's something that does motivate these type of people. And Haskell, given the way things are set up, is the most effective way to do that. Then like that puts them in a more like positive relationship with it. So yeah, I guess I'm just curious why like. It seems odd to me that the unengaged Haskell developers would end up on a project like Building.
I'm trying to figure out how to rephrase that for the recording. I guess the question is really how is it not an allocation of people problem that people that are unengaged are ending up on developing things like this. And I think my point is that in order to grow the ecosystem and grow the number of people that are using Haskell, we have to have people like that end up working on any random thing inside of the Haskell ecosystem.
Can I actually
Yeah.
add something to that? So like, in some sense, this is like a very natural phenomenon as Haskell has grown, right? Which is like, if there's going to be companies that are using it, engineers come and go, and you have a project in Haskell, and some of the engineers that might be on it now aren't the engineers that started it, and they might not love that it's Haskell, but that's their job. And like, it was never going to be the case that as Haskell grew, everyone loved it, and every moment of it, right? That wasn't going to be the reality. There was always going to be some point where if Haskell grew big enough, then there were people kind of reluctantly using it. Or, maybe reluctance is a strong word, but,
No.
like, that's just kind of a natural consequence of growing, right? Like, yeah.
I think what I'm maybe getting at is like, it seems like maybe there's a critical threshold of engagement with Haskell that you have to get for someone to like be able to endure the difficulties of something like a plugin. And if you can get, said people working on things that raise that sort of engagement in a more effective way, like, being able to ship, a feature in a relatively concise amount of code in a short amount of time with Haskell, then like eventually that builds up, and then like they have some sort of, I guess, community to kind of the rough edges. Yeah.
I mean, so what's being described is really a stair step in growth of developers, right? So that they become more familiar with Haskell, and then the paper cuts that might be experienced in things become less problematic. But I would argue that if Edward Komet is telling us that he's never successfully written a plugin, that it's okay, one. But if you're saying that it's hard, then it's probably too hard. Go ahead.
Maybe just rephrasing what other people have said, but I kind of buy part of your argument, but not the plugin bit. I think
the plugin is an example.
Right. Okay. Like the unengaged user, what's like a reasonable thing that you might expect them to be able to do? And it might be like making a library that's a random binding to a random web API and then publishing that on a package. Right. That's a kind of and that's the thing where it's very broad. There's vast amounts of that. And then like the really hard stuff, like building a language tooling, is then more the domain of the experts, the engaged, and what you expect the long tail of unengaged and less engaged users to be contributing might be that very broad range of libraries for random stuff that only 10 people use.
Yes, but
it's like those 100,000 libraries.
Again, part of my idea here is that I want us to be able to grow to the point that we are Python or Java, and if we're going to grow that big, then we're going to need people that are unengaged. It is just a job for them, and they get assigned to work on language tools.
We do have to
even if they're not core tools.
Yeah. Sorry, so we're out of time.
Yeah.
Let's thank Trevis.
Thank you.